Welcome to Nightmare Lullabies. Here, we bring you chilling tales to keep you on edge while helping you unwind. If you enjoy our stories, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. Got a creepy story of your own? Share it in the comments below. We might feature it in a future video. Now sit back, relax, and let the story begin. Buying our first home was supposed to be a dream come true. My wife, Rachel, and I had spent months searching for the perfect place, and when we found a cozy 3-bedroom house in a quiet suburban neighborhood, we knew it was the one. It had everything we wanted: an open kitchen, a big backyard, and a friendly community. The price was surprisingly reasonable, and the sellers were eager to close the deal. We didn't question it too much. We were just excited to finally have a place to call our own. The first few weeks went by without any issues. We settled in, decorated the rooms, and even started planning a small housewarming party. Everything was perfect, until Rachel started noticing small things out of place. A cupboard left open, a chair slightly pulled out, the front door unlocked in the morning when we were certain we had locked it the night before. At first, we laughed it off. Maybe we're just tired from all the moving, I said. But then one night things took a turn. Rachel woke me up in the middle of the night, shaking my arm. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. I sat up, listening. At first, I heard nothing. Then, faintly, the sound of footsteps coming from downstairs. My heart pounded. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept under the bed and quietly made my way down the stairs. The house was silent, but the back door was slightly open. A chill ran down my spine. Someone had been inside. I checked every room, but nothing seemed to be missing. There were no signs of forced entry. It didn't make sense. The next morning, I installed a security system and changed all the locks. Rachel and I reassured ourselves that it was just a one-time thing. Maybe we had forgotten to lock the door before bed. But then, 2 nights later, it happened again. This time, we heard soft creaking, like footsteps on the wooden floor outside our bedroom. I jumped out of bed and swung the door open, but the hallway was empty. I checked the security cameras the next morning. At 3:14 a.m., the motion detector picked up movement near the back door, but the footage showed nothing. Just an empty hallway. Rachel wanted to call the police, but what would we even say? Our house might be haunted, or someone keeps breaking in without a trace? A few days later, things escalated. Rachel came home from work early and found the fridge open, a half-eaten sandwich on the counter, and the shower running. She ran out of the house and called me in a panic. I rushed home and searched every inch of the place. There was no one there. No signs of a break-in, but someone had been inside. That night, I stayed up with a knife in my lap, waiting. At 2:50 a.m., I heard it again, footsteps slow and deliberate. But this time, they weren't coming from downstairs. They were coming from the attic. I felt my stomach drop. Our attic had a small, pull-down ladder in the hallway. I grabbed my bat and tiptoed toward it. Slowly, I reached up and pulled the string. The ladder creaked open. For a moment, I hesitated. Then, gripping the bat tightly, I climbed up. The attic was dark and dusty, filled with boxes and old furniture. But then in the corner I saw it. A small sleeping bag. Empty food wrappers. Bottles of water. Someone had been living in our attic. I climbed down and locked the attic door. Rachel and I left the house immediately and called the police. When they arrived, they searched the attic but found nothing. Whoever had been staying there was gone. The police suspected it was a squatter who had access to the house before we moved in. Maybe a former tenant, or someone who knew a way in that we hadn't discovered. We moved out the following week. The new owners probably think they got a great deal. I just hope they never wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of footsteps coming from the attic. Buying a new home is supposed to be exciting. A fresh start. A new chapter. For me, it was all of those things, but also something else. Something I still struggle to understand to this day. It all started when I found a listing online. A beautiful Victorian-style house, a little rundown but full of character. It was located on the edge of town, surrounded by trees, and had a wraparound porch that looked like something straight out of a postcard. The price was suspiciously low, but I wasn't about to question my luck. I contacted the seller immediately. Oddly, there was no realtor involved, just a man who claimed to be the owner. He sounded rushed over the phone, almost desperate to get rid of the place. He said he could meet me there the next evening. I should have known something was off from the start. I arrived at the house just before sunset. The driveway was cracked, the grass overgrown. The house itself was grand but clearly neglected, chipped paint, a few broken shutters. The man was already there, waiting on the porch. He was in his late 50s with graying hair and tired eyes. His hands trembled as he handed me the key. "Take a look," he said quickly. "I'll wait outside." That was weird. Usually, sellers want to walk you through a house, pointing out the best features. But he stayed put, arms crossed, staring off into the woods. I shrugged it off and stepped inside. The interior was surprisingly clean. Dusty but not abandoned. The furniture was still in place, old but intact. It was as if the previous owners had just walked out one day and never returned. A chill ran down my spine. Something about the place felt wrong. Not haunted, not eerie in a supernatural way, but like I was trespassing somewhere I shouldn't be. I moved through the rooms, taking everything in. The high ceilings, the old wooden staircase, the grand fireplace. It was beautiful in a forgotten, decaying kind of way. Then I noticed something strange. The dining table was set. Plates, silverware, even glasses of water. As if someone had prepared a meal and never sat down to eat. The food was long gone, of course, just dried up remnants of what looked like a roast dinner. I frowned. "Hello," I called out, half expecting someone to answer. Silenced. I made my way upstairs. The bedrooms were just as untouched as the rest of the house. Beds made, clothes neatly folded on chairs, family portraits still hanging on the walls. It didn't feel like an abandoned house. It felt paused. Then I found the note. It was sitting on the nightstand in the master bedroom, written on yellowed paper in shaky handwriting. "If you find this, please leave. This house is not for sale." My heart started pounding. I turned and rushed downstairs, ready to confront the seller. But when I stepped outside, he was gone. I got into my car and drove home, my mind racing. Something about that house wasn't right, and I needed to know what. That night I did some digging. At first, there was nothing unusual. The house had been built in the late 1800s, passed down through generations. The last recorded owner was a man named Richard Holloway. I dug deeper. There was no record of him selling the house. In fact, there was no record of him at all in the last 10 years. The last known event at that address? A missing persons report. Not one person. A whole family. Richard Holloway, his wife, and their 2 children. Vanished without a trace. The house had been empty ever since. So who the hell had I met? I should have left it alone. I should have walked away. But something pulled me back. I needed to know. The next night I drove back. The house looked the same, untouched. But this time the front door was open. I hesitated, then stepped inside. The air was thick, heavy with something I couldn't name. I moved carefully, listening for any signs of movement. Then I heard it. A whisper. Not words. Just a soft, breathy sound, like someone exhaling right behind me. I spun around. No one was there. I was about to turn back when I noticed something I had missed before. A door, half hidden behind an old bookshelf. I swallowed hard and reached for the handle. It led to the basement. The basement. The stairs creaked under my weight as I descended. The air was damp, the smell of mold strong. My flashlight flickered. Then I saw them. 4 chairs, each with ropes still tied around the armrests. I backed away, my heart hammering. And that's when I noticed the writing on the wall. Scratched into the wood over and over. "Let US leave. Let US leave. Let US leave." I ran. I don't remember how I got back to my car, but I didn't stop driving until I was miles away. The next morning, I called the police. They searched the house but found nothing. No bodies. No signs of a struggle. The man who had shown me the house? No trace of him. The house is still there, still listed for sale. Every few months, a new listing pops up, always under a different name. Always priced just low enough to lure someone in. I don't know what happened to the Holloway family. But I know one thing. That house was never meant to be sold. Moving to a new town is supposed to be a fresh start. That's what I kept telling myself as I drove through the quiet, tree-lined streets of Willow Creek. I had just landed a remote job, which meant I could finally leave the cramped city apartment behind and find somewhere peaceful. I wanted space. I wanted quiet, and that's exactly what I found, at least at first. The house was perfect. A small 2-story colonial-style home at the end of a cul-de-sac, with a wide front porch and a massive backyard. It had been sitting on the market for months, which was a little odd, considering the price was almost too good to be true. I didn't question it. I should have. The moment I stepped inside for the first time, I felt it. A presence. Not something supernatural, nothing that made the hair on my arms stand up. But something was just off, like the house was waiting for me, watching. The realtor, a woman named Claire, was overly enthusiastic, talking about the charm of an older home and how some people just don't appreciate character. I barely listened. My attention was on the windows. They were huge, almost too big for the rooms they were in, stretching nearly floor to ceiling. The house was filled with natural light, which was nice, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the windows weren't for looking out. They were for something else to look in. Still, I signed the papers that afternoon. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. The first night in a new home always feels strange. The silence is different. The air smells unfamiliar. The sounds of the house, creaks and groans you aren't used to, keep you awake. I tried to ignore it, but sometime around 2 a.m., I woke up. The bedroom was cold, even though I had set the thermostat to a comfortable temperature. The air felt thicker, like I wasn't alone. Then I heard it. A soft tap, tap, tap. It was coming from the living room window. I told myself it was just the wind, maybe a tree branch. But when I got up and checked, there was nothing outside that could have made the sound. I locked the front door, checked the windows, and went back to bed. I should have left then. Over the next few days, things only got stranger. Every night between 2 and 3 a.m., I would wake up. Always cold, always uneasy, and always to the sound of tapping. I started keeping the blinds shut, but that didn't help. The house wanted me to look outside. One night I gave in. I pulled back the curtain just an inch, and I saw it. A figure, standing at the edge of my yard, just beyond the reach of my porch light. Not moving, not shifting, just standing, watching. I couldn't see any details, just a shadowy shape, barely visible in the darkness. I blinked, and it was gone. I told myself I was imagining things, that my mind was playing tricks on me, but I started noticing something else. Every morning, when I went outside, the grass beneath the windows was pressed down, like someone had been standing there for hours, watching me. By the second week, I was exhausted. I wasn't sleeping. My work was suffering. I started avoiding the windows altogether, keeping the curtains drawn during the day and triple-checking the locks before bed. But then, something happened that I couldn't ignore. One night, after another restless evening, I went to grab a glass of water. As I stepped into the hallway, I noticed something strange. The door to the basement, one I never used, was unlocked. I knew for a fact I had locked it the day before. My heart pounded as I reached for the handle, my fingers hesitating. I took a deep breath, then pulled the door open. The basement was pitch black. My phone flashlight barely cut through the darkness, but as I stepped onto the first stair, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Footprints. Not mine. Bare footprints, leading from the bottom of the stairs to the door I had just opened. Someone had been inside my house. I slammed the door shut and locked it. Then I called the police. The cops arrived quickly. They checked the basement, the windows, the doors. No signs of forced entry. No evidence of a break-in. Probably just an animal, one of them said. I didn't believe him. The next morning, I called Claire, the realtor. I didn't tell her everything, just that I had some concerns. I asked about the previous owner. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then she sighed. You should probably know. The last owner left in a hurry. Why? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Another pause. He said the house watched him. A chill ran down my spine. He told me he felt like something was outside every night, staring in through the windows. He had cameras installed, but they never caught anything. Just static. I swallowed hard. How long was he here? 3 months. I didn't respond, because in that moment I knew. I wasn't staying here. That night I packed a bag. I planned to check into a motel and put the house back on the market first thing in the morning. But the house had other plans. At exactly 2:34 a.m., I woke up. The tapping was louder this time. I squeezed my eyes shut, refusing to look. Then, a creak. Inside the house. I shot up in bed, my heart pounding. Then, from the hallway. Tap, tap, tap. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, moving toward my bedroom door. I didn't wait. I grabbed my keys, ran out the front door, and didn't look back. The next morning, I listed the house. I didn't even bother going back inside. I hired movers to pack my things while I waited in my car. A week later, I was gone. I still check the listings sometimes. The house always ends up back on the market. And the price? It keeps getting lower. But I know the truth. That house isn't for living. It's for watching. And it's always waiting for someone new. Buying a house is supposed to be exciting. That's what I kept telling myself as I pulled into the driveway of the little blue house on Sycamore Street. It was the last one on my list for the day, and I wasn't expecting much. The online pictures made it look decent, though a little outdated, but the price was well within my budget, and in this market, that was rare. I stepped out of the car, stretched my legs, and took a deep breath. The air smelled fresh, with a hint of pine and damp earth. It had rained earlier, and the pavement was still wet, reflecting the gray sky above. The real estate agent, a cheerful woman named Lisa, was already waiting for me on the porch. "You're going to love this one," she said with a bright smile. "It's been on the market for a little while, but it's a solid house. Just needs the right buyer." I nodded, following her inside. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Not bad, just old, like a house that had been sitting empty for too long. The floors creaked under my weight, and a slight draft brushed against my skin as I stepped into the living room. It was a cozy space with a large bay window that overlooked the quiet street. The furniture was still there, covered in white sheets. "The previous owner left in a hurry," Lisa said, as if reading my thoughts. "They didn't take much with them." I ran my fingers over the dust-covered mantel above the fireplace. "Why'd they leave?" I asked. Lisa hesitated for a fraction of a second before answering. "Relocated for work," she said quickly. "It happens." I nodded again, though something about her tone felt off. We moved through the house, checking out the kitchen, the bedrooms, the small but well-kept backyard. Everything seemed fine. A little outdated, maybe, but nothing I couldn't fix. Then we got to the basement. The door was painted white, chipped around the edges, with an old brass doorknob that felt cold under my hand. Lisa shifted uncomfortably as I opened it. The stairs creaked with each step as we descended into the dimly lit space below. The basement was unfinished, with exposed brick walls and a concrete floor. The air was thick, heavy, and something about it made my skin crawl. In the corner, an old wooden workbench sat beneath a single hanging light bulb. Beside it, a wooden cabinet stood against the wall, its doors slightly ajar. "What's in there?" I asked, walking toward it. Lisa stayed at the bottom of the stairs. "Oh, just some old junk. The previous owner didn't bother clearing it out." I reached for the cabinet doors and pulled them open. Inside were stacks of newspapers, neatly folded and yellowed with age. I grabbed one at random, unfolding it carefully. My breath caught in my throat as I read the headline. "Local man vanishes without a trace. Last seen at Sycamore Street residence." The date was from 10 years ago. I grabbed another. Another disappearance linked to Sycamore Street home. Authorities baffled. My hands began to shake as I sifted through the pile. Each article was about someone who had gone missing, all connected to this house. I turned to Lisa, my voice barely above a whisper. "Did you know about this?" Her face was pale, her cheerful demeanor completely gone. She started, then stopped. A sudden sound echoed through the basement, a faint thump from somewhere deeper in the house. My stomach turned to ice. "What was that?" I asked. Lisa didn't answer. Another thump, this time from directly above us. The living room. Slowly, we made our way back up the stairs. The house was silent, eerily so. The air felt thicker than before, like the walls were pressing in on us. "I think I should go," I muttered, my pulse hammering in my ears. Lisa nodded stiffly. "Yeah, good idea." As we stepped onto the porch, I turned back for one last look. The bay window reflected the overcast sky, the house standing quiet and unassuming. But something inside me knew. This house had secrets, and some things were better left undiscovered. I had been searching for a new place for months, and every house I saw had something wrong with it. Either it was too expensive, too far from work, or just didn't feel right. When I came across a listing for a small, affordable home on the outskirts of town, I figured I'd give it a shot. The pictures looked nice, nothing fancy, but cozy enough. I scheduled a viewing for the next afternoon. The real estate agent, a guy named Mark, met me in the driveway. He was friendly, a little too eager maybe, but I didn't think much of it. "You're gonna love this place," he said, unlocking the front door. "It's been recently renovated, new floors, new plumbing, and the backyard is great if you ever want to entertain." I stepped inside, and the first thing I noticed was how empty it felt. Not just because it was unfurnished, but the air itself felt hollow, like the house was waiting for something. The living room was nice, lots of natural light from the big windows. The kitchen had new countertops and appliances, though it smelled faintly of something metallic. "What's that smell?" I asked. Mark hesitated for half a second before shrugging. "Probably just the pipes. The house has been sitting for a little while." I let it go and continued the tour. The bedrooms were fine, nothing special, but big enough for what I needed. Then we got to the hallway leading to the back of the house. Something about it felt off. The floorboards here were a different color than the rest of the house, slightly darker, almost like they had been replaced separately from the others. I ran my foot over them, feeling an unevenness beneath the surface. "What's under here?" I asked. Mark gave a nervous chuckle. "Oh, just some old foundation work. The previous owner had some repairs done." He was talking fast, like he wanted to move on, but my curiosity got the better of me. "Mind if I take a closer look?" Before he could answer, I crouched down and knocked on the wood. It sounded hollow. Mark shifted uncomfortably. "Look, there's nothing down there, I assure you. The house has been thoroughly inspected." But I wasn't convinced. I started looking around for something to pry the floorboard up. And that's when I saw it, a single nail sticking out, slightly loose. I grabbed the edge and pulled. The wood came up easier than I expected, revealing a dark, narrow space beneath the floor. My stomach twisted as I realized what I was looking at. A small, hidden room, no more than a few feet deep. And inside, the remains of a sleeping bag, an empty water bottle, and what looked like scratch marks along the walls. I turned to Mark, my mouth dry. "What the hell is this?" His face had gone pale. He took a step back, running a hand through his hair. "Listen, I didn't know if you'd find that. I was told the place was cleaned out before listing." His voice was shaking. "Cleaned out?" I echoed. "What does that mean?" Mark swallowed hard. "The previous owner, he had a tenant, a man who rented a room here. But he just disappeared one day. No one could find him. Police searched the house, but I guess they didn't check here." I looked back at the hidden space, my heart pounding. "You're saying someone lived under the floor?" Mark nodded slowly. "We don't know for how long." A cold shiver ran down my spine. I stood up, wiping my hands on my jeans. "I think I've seen enough." Mark exhaled, rubbing his forehead. "Yeah, I get it." We walked out together, neither of us speaking. As I got into my car, I glanced back at the house. The empty windows stared back, silent and unassuming. But I knew the truth now. Some houses keep secrets buried just beneath the surface. After months of searching, I had finally found an apartment that seemed perfect. It was spacious, affordable, and in a great location. The photos looked promising, and the reviews about the building were positive. I didn't want to waste any time, so I scheduled a viewing right away. The appointment was set for 5 in the afternoon. The sun was already starting to set as I stood in front of the building, a large complex with modern finishes and a clean entrance. The realtor, a woman named Lisa, was already waiting for me at the door. She wore a neat blazer and had a friendly smile on her face. "Nice to meet you," she said as she held the door open for me. "You're going to love it. This is one of our most sought-after units." I stepped inside and looked around. The apartment was beautiful. Large windows let in plenty of natural light. The kitchen was modern, and the floors looked as if they had been recently renovated. It was exactly what I was looking for. But as soon as I took another step, I felt something strange. It was as if the temperature here was just a little lower than in the hallway. A shiver ran down my spine, but I brushed it off. Maybe it was just the ventilation system. Lisa continued talking about the renovations. Everything was redone last year. New pipes, new floors, and the previous owner barely used it. I nodded and walked further in. The living room felt fine, spacious and well-maintained. The kitchen was spotless and still had a faint smell of cleaning products. But when I stepped into the hallway, I felt it again. That sudden, unexplainable chill. As if I had crossed an invisible boundary. I opened the door to the first bedroom. Empty, neat, nothing unusual. The second bedroom, however, made me uneasy. Not because anything was out of place, but because it smelled as if a window had recently been open. Even though everything was clearly shut. How long has this apartment been vacant? I asked. Lisa hesitated for a moment. A few months, she said quickly. I frowned. A few months? It looks like someone lived here last week. She smiled awkwardly. That's because of the cleaning crew. They keep everything fresh. I nodded, but something felt off. I walked to the bathroom and switched on the light. And that's when I saw it. On the edge of the sink lay a toothbrush. Not one that had been forgotten, but a damp, used toothbrush. I looked at Lisa. She followed my gaze, and her face stiffened. That shouldn't be here. The hairs on my neck stood up. Is this apartment really empty? Lisa quickly opened the bathroom cabinet and raised her eyebrows. Inside were shampoo, shaving cream, and a half-empty bottle of deodorant. She shut the cabinet with a snap. This must be a mistake. The previous owner took everything. A sinking feeling crept into my stomach. Are you sure no one lives here? She nodded, but she didn't seem convinced herself. I'll check on this right away. I walked back to the living room and felt that strange chill again. This time it was stronger. And then I heard it. The sound of a door closing. Not inside the apartment, but just outside the front door. I looked at Lisa. She had heard it too. Her face was pale. I slowly walked to the door and looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty, but on the floor, just outside the door, was something that hadn't been there before. A plastic grocery bag with a loaf of bread and a carton of milk. I sucked in a breath and slowly turned back to Lisa. Someone still lives here, I whispered. Her hands trembled slightly. That's impossible. This apartment was sold. No one has the key. My heart pounded. Well, someone does. Lisa grabbed her phone and quickly called someone, probably her office. As she spoke, I walked back into the apartment, scanning the space again, trying to reassure myself. Maybe there was a logical explanation. Maybe the previous tenant still had a key and was just coming back now and then. But why so quietly? Why did it feel like someone was trying to go unnoticed? Lisa hung up and looked at me. There's no reason anyone should be here. But we should leave and contact the owner. I agreed completely. Together, we left the apartment and walked briskly to the elevator. As the doors closed, I took one last look at the hallway. And just at that moment, I saw something move. A shadow slipped quietly around the corner, just out of sight. I held my breath. Lisa didn't see it. The elevator started to descend. That's when I knew for sure. Someone still lived there, and they didn't want to be found. After finally saving enough money, I was ready to move out of my small, overpriced apartment and into a house. I wanted something simple, a starter home with a decent yard and a quiet neighborhood. After weeks of searching, I found one that seemed perfect, 3 bedrooms, a nice backyard, and just within my budget. The listing had only been up for a few days, so I contacted the real estate agent immediately. He responded quickly and scheduled a viewing for the next afternoon. When I arrived, the house looked just like it had in the pictures, modest but well kept. The lawn was trimmed, the siding had a fresh coat of paint, and the windows were spotless. The only thing that seemed odd was the for sale sign. It looked older, more faded than I expected for a recent listing. The agent, a man in his late 40s named Mark, greeted me at the door with a firm handshake. "You're going to love this place," he said with enthusiasm. "It's been on the market for a while, but I think it's a great fit for you." That struck me as strange. "A while?" I asked. "I thought it was listed just a few days ago." Mark hesitated for half a second before nodding. "Yes, this particular listing is recent, but the house has been available for a bit longer." I didn't push further. It wasn't uncommon for homes to sit on the market. Maybe there had been previous buyers who backed out. We stepped inside, and the place was exactly what I had hoped for. The living room was spacious, the kitchen had been recently updated, and the bedrooms were a good size. As I moved through the house, though, I noticed something peculiar. There were no personal touches. No furniture left behind, no leftover fixtures from the previous owners. It was as if the house had never been lived in at all. Still, I brushed it off. Maybe they had cleaned it out completely to make the sale easier. Then we got to the basement. The moment the door opened, I felt a shift in the air. It was colder down there, expected for a basement, but this was different. The air felt thick, stale, like it hadn't been disturbed in a long time. Mark gestured for me to go ahead, but for some reason I hesitated. "Is there a light switch?" I asked. He flipped it on, and dim yellow light flickered to life. I slowly made my way down the stairs. The basement was unfinished, with exposed brick walls and a cement floor. It was completely empty, except for one thing. In the far left corner, there was a single wooden chair. It faced the wall, positioned in a way that made it look almost intentional, as if someone had been sitting there for a long time. Did the previous owners leave that? I asked. Mark peered down. Must have. I'll have them remove it. I stepped closer, feeling uneasy. Something about the chair bothered me, though I couldn't explain why. When I turned to leave, I noticed something even stranger. Scratches on the concrete floor, as if the chair had been moved back and forth repeatedly. My gut told me to walk away. Back upstairs, Mark continued his sales pitch, talking about the neighborhood, the property value, and all the usual points. But I wasn't really listening anymore. Something about this house felt off. I decided to step outside for a moment to get some fresh air. As I stood on the front porch, an older woman from next door was watering her plants. She glanced up and saw me, then gave a small wave. Thinking of buying, she called out. Maybe, I replied. Just checking it out. She nodded but didn't look convinced. You should ask him why the last buyer didn't move in. I frowned. What do you mean? She hesitated for a moment, then shook her head. Never mind. Just make sure you really want it before you decide. Before I could ask anything else, she turned and went back inside. When I stepped back in, Mark was waiting by the door with a smile. So, what do you think? I forced a smile. I'll need to think about it. I could see a flash of disappointment in his expression, but he nodded. Of course. Let me know if you have any questions. As I walked back to my car, I glanced at the house one last time. Through one of the upstairs windows, I thought I saw something move. Just for a second. It could have been a trick of the light, or my imagination. But as I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been watching me the entire time. After months of searching, I finally found what seemed like the perfect home. It was a small, two-story house on the edge of a quiet suburban neighborhood. The price was surprisingly affordable, and the photos made it look cozy and well-maintained. I reached out to the realtor immediately and scheduled a tour. The day of the viewing, I arrived early and took a moment to admire the house from the outside. It had a charming look, white siding, blue shutters, and a small porch with a swing. It felt like the kind of place where I could actually settle down. The realtor, a man named Daniel, pulled up right on time. He was friendly, professional, and seemed genuinely excited about the property. You're going to love this one, he said as he led me to the front door. It's been on the market for a little while, but honestly, I don't know why. It's a great house. That last part made me pause. How long has it been on the market? He hesitated for just a second before answering. A little over a year. A year. That was unusual for a house like this, especially in a decent neighborhood. Has it had any previous offers? Daniel nodded. A few, but for one reason or another, the buyers always backed out before closing. That should have been a red flag, but I pushed the thought aside and stepped inside. The house was just as charming on the inside as it was on the outside. The living room had hardwood floors, the kitchen had new appliances, and the upstairs bedrooms were spacious. There was even a little attic with a pull-down ladder, which I always found kind of cool. But as I moved through the house, I started noticing small details that felt off. The walls were freshly painted, but certain spots looked like they had been painted over multiple times, as if trying to cover something. The upstairs hallway had a faint but noticeable draft, even though the windows were all closed. And then there was the smell. Not strong, not overwhelming, but something faint in the background. A mix of old wood and something else. Something I couldn't quite place. I tried to ignore it as we moved to the backyard. It was a nice open space with a tall wooden fence, perfect for privacy. As I stood there imagining summer barbecues and quiet evenings, Daniel's phone rang. Give me just a minute, he said, stepping aside to take the call. I took the chance to wander a bit and walked toward the side of the house. That's when I noticed something strange. The basement had a separate entrance from the outside. A heavy-looking wooden door with a rusty padlock. I hadn't seen a basement entrance in the house earlier. Had we missed a door somewhere inside? Curious, I walked back to Daniel, who had just ended his call. Hey, does this place have a basement? He hesitated again, just for a second. Then he nodded. Yeah, but it's unfinished. Just storage space. Can we take a look? His smile faltered just slightly. The key for the padlock isn't here. The owners keep it locked because there's nothing really down there. Just old stuff from previous tenants. Something about the way he said it didn't sit right with me. When we went back inside, I scanned the rooms again, looking for a basement door. And there it was, right by the kitchen, almost blending into the wall. I reached for the knob. Locked. I turned to Daniel, raising an eyebrow. I thought you said the basement was just storage. Why is it locked from the inside? His expression remained neutral, but I could see the tension in his jaw. Like I said, nothing important down there. I nodded but made up my mind right then and there. I wasn't buying this house. Before we left, I took one last look around, and something in the hallway caught my eye. The attic pull-down ladder was slightly open. I was sure it had been fully closed earlier. Did you open that? I asked. Daniel turned to see what I was talking about. His face went pale. No, I didn't. A slow, creaking sound came from above, like the sound of someone shifting their weight on old wooden beams. We stood there in silence for what felt like forever. Then, without saying another word, Daniel reached up and shut the attic hatch. Firmly. Let's go, he said quickly. I didn't argue. As we stepped outside, I turned back to look at the house one last time. The curtain in the upstairs window moved. Not from the wind. It moved like someone had been standing behind it and just stepped away. Daniel locked the front door in a hurry and gave me a forced smile. So, still interested? I shook my head. I think I'll keep looking. As I walked to my car, I heard something from the side of the house. A faint scratching sound, like something or someone inside the basement dragging their nails against the wooden door. I didn't stick around to find out what it was, and I never looked back. Finding a new place to live is always a mix of excitement and stress, but this time, I thought I had struck gold. It was a newly renovated townhouse, located just a few blocks from my office. The rent was reasonable, the neighborhood was quiet, and the landlord seemed eager to get a tenant in as soon as possible. I scheduled a viewing for the next evening after work. The landlord, an older man named Mr. Hayes, greeted me outside the townhouse with a warm but slightly rushed demeanor. "You're going to love this place," he said as he fumbled with the keys. "It's been empty for a little while, but it's in perfect condition now." The way he said "now" stuck in my mind, but I let it go. The place was beautiful, modern kitchen, fresh paint, and the kind of lighting that made every room feel warm and inviting. I wandered through the open-concept living area, picturing my furniture in the space. It felt like home already. As we moved upstairs, I noticed something odd. The second bedroom had no ceiling light. Instead, there was a single-floor lamp plugged into an outlet near the corner. "Does the overhead light not work?" I asked. Mr. Hayes hesitated for just a second before shaking his head. "Oh no, it works. I just, haven't replaced the bulb." That was easy enough to believe. Then I noticed the outlet the lamp was plugged into had a power strip connected to it. The only thing plugged into the strip was the lamp. I didn't think much of it at the time. Everything else about the house seemed fine, so I told Mr. Hayes I'd sleep on it and get back to him in the morning. That night, as I lay in bed, something about the townhouse kept nagging at me. The power strip, the way he hesitated when I asked about the light, the way he had said the house was in perfect condition now. I decided I needed one more look. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove back to the townhouse. Mr. Hayes wasn't expecting me, but I had seen where he kept the spare key in the lockbox. I knew it was wrong, but my gut told me I needed to check something. I let myself in and went straight to the second bedroom. I unplugged the lamp and plugged my phone charger into the power strip. Nothing. No power. I tried the wall outlet directly. Still nothing. The outlet was dead. But then how was the lamp working? I picked it up and examined it closely. That's when I saw it. The lamp wasn't plugged into the outlet for power. The cord had been cut and carefully tucked behind the base. The lamp wasn't a lamp. It was a camera. Someone had been watching. I felt my stomach drop as I realized someone might still be watching. I turned around slowly, suddenly hyper-aware of the silence in the house. And then I heard it, a soft creaking noise, coming from inside the closet. I stood frozen, my heart pounding. The closet door was slightly ajar. Not enough to see inside, but enough to know someone could be hiding. I took a slow step backward. The floorboard beneath me creaked, and in response I heard a faint, deliberate exhale from behind the door. I bolted. I ran downstairs, out the front door, and straight to my car. I didn't stop to lock the house. I didn't stop to check if anyone followed. I just drove. Mr. Hayes called me later that day. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail, his voice overly casual. "Hey, I noticed you stopped by earlier. If you're still interested in the place, let's talk. No rush. I deleted the message. A few days later, I checked the listing. The townhouse was no longer available, and a new listing had popped up. Different address, different photos, but the same floor lamp. Finding a new place to live is always a mix of excitement and stress, but this time, I thought I had struck gold. It was a newly renovated townhouse, located just a few blocks from my office. The rent was reasonable, the neighborhood was quiet, and the landlord seemed eager to get a tenant in as soon as possible. I scheduled a viewing for the next evening after work. The landlord, an older man named Mr. Hayes, greeted me outside the townhouse with a warm but slightly rushed demeanor. "You're going to love this place," he said as he fumbled with the keys. "It's been empty for a little while, but it's in perfect condition now." The way he said "now" stuck in my mind, but I let it go. The place was beautiful, modern kitchen, fresh paint, and the kind of lighting that made every room feel warm and inviting. I wandered through the open-concept living area, picturing my furniture in the space. It felt like home already. As we moved upstairs, I noticed something odd. The second bedroom had no ceiling light. Instead, there was a single floor lamp plugged into an outlet near the corner. "Does the overhead light not work?" I asked. Mr. Hayes hesitated for just a second before shaking his head. "Oh no, it works. I just, haven't replaced the bulb." That was easy enough to believe. Then I noticed the outlet the lamp was plugged into had a power strip connected to it. The only thing plugged into the strip was the lamp. I didn't think much of it at the time. Everything else about the house seemed fine, so I told Mr. Hayes I'd sleep on it and get back to him in the morning. That night, as I lay in bed, something about the townhouse kept nagging at me. The power strip, the way he hesitated when I asked about the light, the way he had said the house was in perfect condition now. I decided I needed one more look. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove back to the townhouse. Mr. Hayes wasn't expecting me, but I had seen where he kept the spare key in the lockbox. I knew it was wrong, but my gut told me I needed to check something. I let myself in and went straight to the second bedroom. I unplugged the lamp and plugged my phone charger into the power strip. Nothing. No power. I tried the wall outlet directly. Still nothing. The outlet was dead. But then how was the lamp working? I picked it up and examined it closely. That's when I saw it. The lamp wasn't plugged into the outlet for power. The cord had been cut and carefully tucked behind the base. The lamp wasn't a lamp. It was a camera. Someone had been watching. I felt my stomach drop as I realized someone might still be watching. I turned around slowly, suddenly hyper-aware of the silence in the house. And then I heard it, a soft creaking noise, coming from inside the closet. I stood frozen, my heart pounding. The closet door was slightly ajar. Not enough to see inside, but enough to know someone could be hiding. I took a slow step backward. The floorboard beneath me creaked, and in response I heard a faint, deliberate exhale from behind the door. I bolted. I ran downstairs, out the front door, and straight to my car. I didn't stop to lock the house. I didn't stop to check if anyone followed. I just drove. Mr. Hayes called me later that day. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail, his voice overly casual. "Hey, I noticed you stopped by earlier. If you're still interested in the place, let's talk." No rush. I deleted the message. A few days later, I checked the listing. The townhouse was no longer available, and a new listing had popped up. Different address, different photos, but the same floor lamp.